Eagles move on to Super Bowl 57. They defeat the San Francisco 49ers 31-7 out there at Lincoln Financial Field. What a game. What a game. The Eagles, you know, are there. They're in the Super Bowl. They made it. They advanced. Who would have ever thought that the Philadelphia Eagles at the start of the season with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback would be in the Super Bowl? I mean, just the way last season ended, where they got blown out in Tampa Bay by the Buccaneers, and Jalen Hurts wasn't very good. And you said to yourself, well, do the Eagles have a quarterback of the future? Well, it turns out they do. They have their quarterback of the future and beyond. They have a franchise quarterback. Jalen Hurts has led the Eagles to the Super Bowl. Hurts wasn't great today, but he was solid. He got the job done. He made the plays. Look, this game, the first quarter, first two drives really was the game. That 4th and 3 with the big catch by Devontae Smith, which really wasn't a catch, but they called it a catch, and it's a catch no matter how you slice it, but it was a catch by Devontae Smith, even though they said it wasn't a catch. That's when this game turned, and the Eagles ultimately score there. 49ers get the ball back. Brock Purdy is hit by Hassan Reddick, fumbles the ball. He hurts his elbow. He's done. Josh Johnson comes in. He eventually is done in the third quarter. It was a body bag game for you old school Eagles fans back in the 90s, where Buddy Ryan's defense did it to the Washington Redskins, then the Washington Redskins at the time. It was a body bag game. And the Eagles just dominated this game. And again, the 49ers did something that they haven't done throughout the course of the playoffs, and that was penalties. The 49ers had big-time penalties, too many penalties, and those penalties haunted the 49ers in this particular contest. It's hard to overcome those kind of penalties when you're playing a good team like the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are a good football team. They don't make no mistakes. And the 49ers had 11 penalties for 81 yards. And those 81 yards were huge, and it's always huge when you play a team the caliber of the Philadelphia Eagles. So the 49ers, they overcame Trey Lance going down. They overcame Jimmy G going down, but they couldn't overcome Brock Purdy going down. And again, they were on their fourth quarterback, and ultimately it wasn't enough. Their season again ends in the NFC Championship game, just like it did a year ago against the Los Angeles Rams. This time they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field. Again, big play in this game. One of the big plays, Devontae Smith, big 29-yard catch on 4th and 3. The Eagles go for 4th and 3 at their 49ers 35-yard line. Hurts rolls left, throws it. Smith makes a spectacular one-handed catch. So we thought, so we think, so we believe. And ultimately, they dropped it. I mean, he did drop it, but they said it was a catch, and ultimately it was a catch according to the officials, but it wasn't a catch according to replay. But the 49ers didn't challenge it. Yes, Trent Williams did go crazy at the end of the game. That was frustration. 49ers had some frustration plays near the end of that game, pushing Jalen Hurts out of bounds there late. I mean, but it was a frustrating day for the 49ers. In a lot of ways, a frustrating year when you consider that this football team went through all these different quarterbacks and all these different quarterbacks throughout the course of this season. Again, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, all these different quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, and then ultimately Josh Johnson. They all went down. Purdy did come back in, but he couldn't throw the football. You got to feel for Brock Purdy. I mean, Mr. Irrelevant put himself in this position, got to the NFC Championship game in the biggest game of his life. He hurts his elbow, and that's it. That's the ball game. And that was it. That was pretty much it at that point. Big turn of events there. You know, you saw Christian McCaffrey. He had that big drive for them, made a bunch of plays on that drive, a couple catches, and that big run that ultimately tied the game at 7. You know, saying the 49ers had an opportunity there to maybe stick around. Their defense was keeping them in the game for periods of time. But ultimately, the Eagles came back with a huge drive, and that was the drive of the game there. They went for it there on that fourth and inches, 4th and 1 from their own 34-yard line. And then ultimately, they eventually just matriculated their way down the field and got a big touchdown, 14-7. And then the 49ers, you thought, who knew? Maybe they were going to go conservative there. They decided to go after it. Josh Johnson completes a pass there, gets him down to the 40. I believe that was to Deebo Samuel. And then Josh Johnson fumbles the snap there, the shotgun snap. Eagles recover the football, and then the Eagles were in business. They eventually would score there to make it 21-7. And again, that pretty much was the game, 21-7. That was the game at that point. You knew the 49ers were done. You knew they would have a hard time scoring 21 points and more with Josh Johnson as their quarterback, their third string quarterback. There was talk throughout the course of the week that Jimmy G would give it a go or would be available, but Jimmy G wasn't available. And it would have been huge if Jimmy G was available for the 49ers. In this one, he's a competent NFL quarterback. Josh Johnson, at this point, at this moment, at this time, is not a competent NFL quarterback, and that's just based on the way he performed today and beyond. So here's the thing. The Eagles now move on to Super Bowl 57. And they move on to 57, Super Bowl 57. This team is, the health is on their side. We'll see what happens with Landon Dickerson, their guard. Hopefully there's nothing serious there. But they're healthy. I mean, everybody that they need is there on the football field. They're available. And in this league, in order to get to the Super Bowl, sometimes you need a lot of help. You need a lot of things to go your way. You need health to be on your side. And health was on the side of the Philadelphia Eagles this season. And health is on the side of the Philadelphia Eagles at this moment, at this time. So credit to the Eagles for staying healthy, right? And some of that is just luck. It's just luck. Conversely, on the other side, the 49ers just didn't have health. And their inability to stay healthy is one of the reasons they are not going to Super Bowl 57. Jalen Hurts had a rushing touchdown today. 15 rushing touchdowns this season for Jalen Hurts. That is the most by a quarterback in a single season in NFL history. Granted, they played 17 games this season, and granted, he played 2 more in the playoffs. But again, 15 rushing touchdowns by Hurts. Again, the most by a quarterback in NFL history. That is huge. But probably what's bigger than that in terms of what happened in this particular game was what happened with the penalties. And especially on that drive where the Eagles moved the ball down the field and ultimately scored there right before halftime. The first drive before they got the ball back before halftime, the 49ers had 3 penalties on that drive. And those 3 penalties were huge. Those were 3 huge penalties by the San Francisco 49ers that really impacted this game and helped the Eagles score there on that drive to make it 14-7. That was a huge drive. And that was a huge response by the Eagles, because you figure if the 49ers stop the Eagles there and that on that drive and get the ball back and you know, who knows, score again or do something, that changed the whole complexity of the game. That changes the whole complexity of the game. But the Eagles were able to score there, able to get the ball back on the fumble by Josh Johnson and score there. And again, that was essentially the game. And the 49ers, again, just did not play disciplined football today. 2 penalties, 11 penalties, 81 yards. You cannot have that many penalties against a team that is good as the Philadelphia Eagles and expect to win. It's just not going to happen for you, and it didn't happen for the 49ers. And it's even harder when your quarterback is out. When the guy who got you to this point, when the guy who got you to this moment, to the guy who you know picked up the pieces when all your quarterbacks went down, Brock Purdy, and then he gets hurt, and he's just not couldn't. You feel bad for the guy because of what he endured, you know, Mr. Irrelevant, and what he did to get this team in this position is kind of unheard of in a lot of ways, and it's a credit to him for doing what he did to get this team in this spot and to put this team in this position. But you got to look at the Eagles. And the Eagles, and look, this 49er, Jalen Hurts was a little off today. Jalen Hurts wasn't great. 15 for 25, 121 yards, 37 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts wasn't really that great in this game if you watch it. Right, he had some underthrows, he had some overthrows. He had a shot to A.J. Brown on a deep one. He overthrew him. He also had a shot there That Devontae Smith pass where Devontae Smith made the catch, but it wasn't a catch, but they said it was a catch, right? That play, that ball was a little overthrown. Granted, he was moving to his left and throwing on the run, so it was a difficult pass, but it was a not so great pass. And Hurts, again, he wasn't on, he wasn't on point today, but he was good enough. And here's the thing, right? We talk about Dak Prescott. What Dak Prescott did last week is he turned the ball over 2 picks. What Jalen Hurts did this week is he didn't turn the ball over. Jalen Hurts protected the football. And that's a credit to Jalen Hurts, and that's a credit to who he is. And that's a credit to what he's done all year long. That's protect the football. Only 6 interceptions this year from Jalen Hurts. So he's protected the football at a high level this particular season. And you look at how he has done and what he has done in these playoffs, he's just protected the football. There's no turnovers from this guy. He didn't turn the ball over, and he just made play after play after play. It was a workmanlike performance by Jalen Hurts today. Jalen Hurts wasn't great, but it was a workmanlike performance from Hurts. He worked, he battled, he fought, and he put the Eagles in position to win this particular game. You look at this from ESPN Stats and Info, the Eagles are the 5th team to win divisional playoff and conference championship game by at least 21 points. Each of those previous 4 teams won the Super Bowl. So that bodes well for the Eagles. Again, them and how they handle their business and how they did what they did in these playoffs. I mean, they beat the Giants, blew the Giants out easily, all right, 38-7. And they blew out the Niners 31-7. They have outscored those 2 teams 69-14 in these playoffs. So the Eagles haven't had much adversity. And, it was kind of, this was a grinded out game. Don't get it's a physical game. 49ers are a physical team, and this was a physical game, and the 49ers brought it. They brought their heart. That defense is tough. And we knew that. Number 1 defense in this league coming into this game. We knew that defense was tough. But one thing I talked about with the 49ers and the Cowboys, that was a hard-hitting slugfest. And then the 49ers came out of it, and it came into this week, and then guys started to break down a little bit. You call it fluke along the way. I'm not saying attribute it all to what they did against the Cowboys. But again, that was a tough game against the Dallas Cowboys that the 49ers had. And they came across the country, came to the Eagles. And again, those guys just, you could say they broke down to a degree. Guys were just falling left to right throughout the course of the game. Some freaky, right? Nick Bosa's situation, that was a freaky injury. And he battled and gutted it out throughout the course of this game. And look, the 49ers kept Jalen Hurts under wraps in a lot of ways. They didn't allow him to hit off any big runs. He did hit off some big runs there on that final drive, that final scoring drive for the Eagles. But for the most part, the 49ers did a great job of containing him and keeping him under wraps and keeping him under lock and key to a degree. But when you don't have production from your quarterback play, doesn't matter about Deebo Samuel, doesn't matter about Christian McCaffrey, doesn't matter about George Kittle. When your quarterback and the quarterback position is depleted, when Brock Purdy is not 100%, obviously, and then you got to go to Josh Johnson, who's not very good, and then that was clear what we saw today. It's difficult. It's tough. And again, you wonder, would the things be different if at least Jimmy G was healthy? And that's not a knock on anything, but if Purdy goes down in this spot and Jimmy G is there, it's a different story for the 49ers, right? They still have a competent NFL quarterback in Jimmy G running the show if, in fact, they had to go that route, which they would have had because of Brock Purdy going down. But look, I felt coming into this game, the Eagles were just a slightly better team. I had the Eagles winning this game 27-17 coming into this one. And obviously, I didn't expect Brock Purdy to go down the way he did. And who expected that? And then I didn't expect Josh Johnson to go down the way he did. Not to say it wouldn't matter much because Josh Johnson isn't very good. But at the end of the day, he is a quarterback. And at the end of the day, the 49ers, pretty much in that midway through that third quarter, didn't have a quarterback. They didn't have a quarterback. And again, they really at that point had no shot against this Eagle football team. Eagles, they're tough. They're a loaded football team. Every position, they're just loaded. Their offensive line is special. The defensive line is special. 75 sacks, including last week's game. I don't know how many sacks they had today. But again, this defense has been special all year long. This offense has been special all year long. This team has been special all year long, and they won games in many different ways. They offensively they won ways, and in this game, they used their running game, which was important for them. Kenneth Gainwell, Miles Sanders did a big time job. The Eagles had 78 sacks this year, 3 sacks today, 5 sacks last week, so 8 sacks thus far in these playoffs. And again, 78 sacks for the season at this point, including the playoffs. So it's happy times in the city of Philadelphia. But again, they got 2 weeks left, right? They got 2 weeks to figure this out, relax, and get ready for either the Chiefs or the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, the Eagles get a big win here. And again, the Eagles have been dominant in these playoffs. But I don't, and coming into this game, I'm saying, well, it dominated the Giants. I knew they were better than the Giants. But the 49ers were a better football or a good football team, much better football team than the Giants. So it would be difficult to beat this team. But the 49ers, again, when you don't have a quarterback, it's very difficult to win in this league. And they didn't have a quarterback. Brock Purdy, again, was after that first drive was pretty much a done deal. He was done. He was a wrap. And at that point, it was pretty much the game in a lot of ways. Again, they fought. Christian McCaffrey had that big run to make it 7-7. And then if you were an Eagles fan, you got a little nervous at that point, saying, okay, this defense for the 49ers is playing fairly well. Eagles not really moving the ball other than that first drive. But then the Eagles had that big, big drive. They went for it on fourth down from their own 34-yard line. And again, that was huge. That was, and statistically you say, well, you're in your own territory. You don't go for it at that spot. But when you play like the Eagles have played this year in terms of the quarterback sneak, it's kind of a no-brainer. Statistically, it's like you just do it. Statistically, you just do it, and who cares, right? So it's 4th and 1 from the 34-yard line, their own 34-yard line, and Jalen Hurts gets the quarterback sneak there, big spot there, gets that big quarterback sneak, and then the Eagles go from there. I mean, it was a huge drive. It was a big drive, and they just rammed it down the 49ers' throat on that drive, ran the ball, 14 plays, 75-yard drive, 6 minutes and 53 seconds, almost 7 minutes elapsed off the clock on that drive, 75 yards, 14 plays. So it was a dominant drive. It was a huge drive. It was a big drive. It was a drive that put the Eagles up 14-7. And that was a big response after that McCaffrey touchdown, because the momentum, after that McCaffrey touchdown, the momentum has slightly shifted back to the 49ers sideline. And the Eagles responded right there and got that momentum right back. Got it right back. And then the next drive, 49ers, you were questioning whether, okay, do they go for it here? Do they try to do something before the half, or they just run it out and, be happy getting the ball to start the second half? They tried to go for it. They were aggressive. And Josh Johnson fumbled the snap, lost the ball, couldn't get it back. And then the Philadelphia Eagles recovered it. Reddick covered it on that play. And then the Eagles were able to score again before halftime. And again, that was essentially it. The game was a wrap at that moment, at that time. And you knew the Eagles were on their way to Super Bowl 57. You knew it. You knew it. You knew it. And again, it's very crazy when you think about how the season ended for the Eagles last year. The way Jalen Hurts played against the Buccaneers. He was awful in that playoff game against the Buccaneers. He wasn't very good. And he made a few mistakes. And he just was inaccurate. He just didn't look the part at all as a guy that you can ride to a Super Bowl. But lo and behold, the Eagles said, you know what? Maybe they tried to find some ways to get somebody else. But, in the offseason, Jalen Hurts got better. In the offseason, the Eagles got better offensively. They added A.J. Brown, right? A number one wide receiver. So he gave Jalen Hurts a number one wide receiver, which was huge. So you had Devontae Smith, who is kind of a number one wide receiver himself. But then you added then you added A.J. Brown to that. So you got Brown and Smith, who are two elite wide receivers in this league. So you have both of those guys. So you gave him a number one wide receiver. And guess what? You gave Hurts a number one wide receiver. It's a different story. He's a different player, right? He's got a number one wide receiver. He's got all those guys. He's got all those special players to throw to. And he threw to him, and he made play after play after play throughout the course of this season. And those guys played dividends together. Whether you want to call Devontae Smith's catch or not a catch, but it was a catch. At the end of the day, it was a catch, and he put himself in position to make that catch. because it was a beautiful one-handed grab, and he tried to make a great play, and he made a great play, and ultimately put the Eagles in position there. And the Eagles went up 7-0, and the Eagles were in control throughout. They were in control throughout, and they go on to Super Bowl 57. If you're the 49ers now, you're frustrated, and you look at this season and you say, injuries and injuries and injuries and injuries. And that's why it's so difficult to get to a Super Bowl, because you got to be healthy. You got to have health on your side. And health was not on the side of 49ers this season, and especially at the quarterback position. When you talk about Trey Lance, when you talk about Jimmy G, and then ultimately today when you talk about Brock Purdy, and then ultimately Josh Johnson as he went down as well. So a difficult game for the 49ers, and they're going to be looking at themselves and kicking themselves to a degree and say, you know what? What if Trey Lance would have stayed healthy? Or what if even Jimmy G would have stayed healthy? Or even what if Brock Purdy would have stayed healthy in this game? Would it have been a different story? Not so sure it would have been. The Eagles just were better, slightly better. And the Eagles are a loaded football team from top to bottom. They have depth. They have, ferocious. They get it done in the trenches, right? Their secondary is big time. Their running game is elite. Their wide receivers are elite. Their tight ends elite. And based on the way he's played this year, their quarterback is elite. So there's a lot of elite when you talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. They're surrounded by a lot of elite quarterback, elite wide receivers, elite tight end, elite offensive defensive line, an elite secondary. And all that elite equals Super Bowl 57, equals NFC champions, and may equal ultimately a Super Bowl championship 2 weeks from now in Arizona. And to think about it, you give Jalen Hurts another 2 more weeks to get that shoulder, better, right? Get it even better, get it healed up even more, and ultimately, put him in a better spot so he can run. And he ran the offense. We saw the running aspect of it. We saw, and that's what makes this offense dynamic. Jalen Hurts makes this offense dynamic. You have to account for him, so it opens it up for the running game, opens it up for Sanders, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, opens it up for all those boys, opens it up for all the offense, and opens up for everybody. And the Eagles go home happy, right? And if you could say 3 plays that changed the course of this game, 4th and 3 on the first drive, Brock Purdy hit by Hassan Reddick, and then maybe that 4th and 1 from the 34-yard line may have been another play that you can point to and look at to say those are the plays that puts the Eagles to Super Bowl 54. What a game by the Eagles. What a performance by the Eagles. And they are in the Super Bowl, and it's amazing because I say this over and over again, and not to belabor the point, but who would have thought this was possible with Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback? Who would have thought that was possible? I don't think anybody did. And here's the interesting thing about this whole thing. The interesting thing about this whole crazy little thing, right? That Carson Wentz gets that big contract, right? Gets hurt in the playoffs. Remember, gets Seattle, gets a concussion, doesn't finish the game. And then ultimately, NFL draft comes around in April, May maybe, and the Eagles said, you know what? Second round. I mean, who knew the Eagles would take Jalen Hurts? We didn't think the Eagles needed a quarterback. They had Carson Wentz, just signed him to a new deal, just got a bunch of money, $100 million contract. The Eagles don't need a quarterback, do that? And the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, and them drafting Jalen Hurts is a reason that this thing is still going. It's a reason that they were able to build a Super Bowl roster. And now, here's the thing. The Eagles need to do this now because some point Jalen Hurts is going to get money. Here's the thing. Once you win a Super Bowl, everybody gets paid. And you got to pay everybody. You can't pay everybody. So it's going to be harder to put a team, build an elite Super Bowl caliber team because everybody's going to get their paper. Jalen Hurts is getting his paper. He's not going to play another game after the Super Bowl until he gets his paper. So Jalen Hurts is going to get his money. You got to pay him. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he's going to be a free agent. He's going to get paid, right? You can't keep everybody. So the Eagles were fortunate that they kept this moving, kept the chains moving because they drafted a quarterback who many people believe they didn't need. They drafted a quarterback who many people were saying, well, why would they draft him in the second round? They had other needs, and they still have Carson Wentz. Well, it turns out them drafting Jalen Hurts was the best thing that ever happened to this franchise because Wentz, we all know what happened to him. The injuries piled up, and ultimately he's not the same quarterback. He's beat up and beat down. And we've seen it, with the Colts, and we've seen it with the Commanders this year. He's not the same dude. He's not the same guy. And Jalen Hurts obviously is that guy and is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, or at least can get you to a Super Bowl. We've seen it. We can all say that at this point. Jalen Hurts can lead you to a Super Bowl. We can officially say that Jalen Hurts has the talent, the ability, the skill set, and everything necessary to get you to a Super Bowl. 2 weeks from now, we're going to say whether or not he has the talent, the ability, and the skill set to be a Super Bowl champion. That's 2 weeks from now. But for now, we can say he's good enough to at least get you to the promised land. He's at least good enough to get you to the promised land. We'll see next 2 weeks from now if he's good enough to win you a Super Bowl title. And that's obviously what you play for. And again, this team is so talented. It's just so much talent on this roster. Last week we talked about Michael Parsons, but Hassan Reddick is super disruptive. He is very disruptive. We talk about Nick Bosa. I know he led the league in sacks this year, but Hassan Reddick is disruptive. He's a disruptor. Hassan Reddick has had a special season. And if you think about it, multiple 10-plus digit sack seasons with multiple teams. So the guy, everywhere he goes, he plays well. He dominates. It's amazing that he's been moving around on 3 different teams, when, sacking a poor quarterback and getting somebody that can get after the quarterback. I mean, you want that in a pass-happy league. You want a guy that can get after the quarterback. So it's amazing that a guy who actually gets after the quarterback has been moved around so many different places in Hassan Reddick. But he's clearly found a home in Philadelphia. He's a Jersey boy, South Jersey boy, so he's basically a Philly boy. So he is home, and he's loving home and playing amazing football, playing amazing big-time football in his home, right? And that's special, and that's big, and he's a difference maker. Look at Howie Roseman and what he did in this offseason. A.J. Brown, right? He's a difference maker. Everybody he's brought in has made a difference. Hassan Reddick, he's a difference maker. All right, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a difference maker. Kaiser White, a difference maker. Eagles had some struggles with the run earlier at one point in the season. They're bringing Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, and they stabilized that point. They stabilized the rushing defense. And then you got Jordan Davis, obviously went down with an ankle, but he's there. Howie Roseman had a heck of an offseason. He had a heck of an offseason in 2017. He had a heck of an offseason this year, right? And a lot of people wanted to run Howie Roseman out of this city, right? Especially after the way he failed on, DK Metcalf. Instead of drafting DK Metcalf, he drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. We know what happened there. Instead of drafting Justin Jefferson, he drafted Jalen Reagor. We know what happened there. And at that point, we were like, get this man out of here. He can't build the team. He's not the guy to do it. The Eagles have all this draft capital, but do I trust Howie Roseman to do all the drafting, right? And that was all the talk in Philadelphia about Howie Roseman. And then Howie Roseman was able to build and do all these different things. Jordan Mailata, right, out of nowhere, got your left tackle for the future and beyond. Obviously, the list goes on and on of what Howie Roseman was able to do with this team. And now the Eagles are 1 win away from winning a Super Bowl, from getting a Super Bowl, from getting the Lombardi, from getting the ring. Unbelievable. Who would have thought that Jalen Hurts would have been the guy to get them there? And we're about to get out of here now. We got another game going on. The Chiefs playing the Bengals there. So great win for the Eagles. They move on to Super Bowl 57. The Eagles get the job done, and they are NFC champions. Later.